Have you ever noticed that the moment your heart breaks, it feels like the ground disappears beneath you? That heaviness in your chest, the endless replay of memories, the question that won't stop echoing. Why wasn't I enough? Here's the truth. Walking away, or being left, isn't a reflection of your worth. It's often the beginning of rediscovering yourself. Many women are stepping back from relationships not because they're afraid of love, but because they're tired of abandoning themselves for the sake of being loved. They're realizing that constantly pouring into others while running on empty leads only to resentment, exhaustion, and loss of self. Healing after a breakup isn't just about getting over someone. It's about coming home to yourself. It's learning to sit with the pain without letting it define you. It's remembering that your value was never tied to who stayed or who left. Psychologically, heartbreak forces the brain to release stress hormones that mimic physical pain. That's why your chest actually hurts. It's your nervous system crying out for safety. The way to soothe it isn't by rushing into another relationship, but by offering yourself the love and stability you once sought from someone else. So ask yourself, what part of me have I been ignoring? What dreams, passions, or joys have I silenced for the sake of keeping someone else close? When women walk away from relationships that no longer honor them, it's not a failure, it's freedom. And in that freedom lies the most important relationship you'll ever have, the one with yourself. When a woman walks away from a relationship, the world often misunderstands her. But I tell you this, she does not walk away because she is weak. She walks away because the soul refuses to remain where it cannot grow. You see, the psyche does not lie. When love turns into self-betrayal, the unconscious begins to protest. It speaks in the language of dreams, in the heaviness of the chest, in the restlessness of the night. What you call heartbreak, I call the awakening of the self. For too long, many women have been conditioned to give away their essence, to mold themselves into what is expected rather than what is true. But when the tension becomes unbearable, when the mask no longer fits, the inner self demands freedom. And leaving becomes not an act of abandonment, but of profound healing. Do not mistake this pain for punishment. It is transformation. The heart aches because the old image of love is dying, and in its place, a new consciousness is trying to be born. Just as the caterpillar must endure the dissolution of its form, so too must you pass through this breaking to emerge renewed. The question is not, why was I not enough? But rather, what part of myself have I been called to reclaim? For within the shadows of grief lies the seed of individuation, the journey back to the wholeness that was always yours. So walk forward, not with bitterness, but with reverence. The end of this relationship is not the end of your story. It is the psyche insisting that you turn inward, that you heal, that you remember. The most essential relationship you will ever have is with your own soul. And when you honor that, love, true love, will find you again, not as dependency, not as loss, but as a meeting of two whole beings who have learned to belong first to themselves. Asterisk. And so, when a woman turns away from love that diminishes her, she is not walking into emptiness. She is walking into the vastness of her own becoming. The departure is not only from another, but from every false image she once carried of herself. Carl Jung tells us that the greatest task of the human soul is individuation, the long journey toward becoming whole, toward reconciling the seen and unseen, the conscious and unconscious. Heartbreak, painful as it is, serves as a summons into that very journey. You may believe you have lost a partner, but in truth, you are being returned to yourself. For every ending tears away illusions that no longer serve your growth. What falls apart on the outside is often what must fall apart within, so that the authentic self may rise. Jung asserts that we do not heal by denying the wound, but by bringing it into the light of consciousness. To grieve deeply is not weakness. It is the soul's way of making room for transformation. The shadows of sorrow are not your enemies. They are the fertile soil from which new life will emerge. Remember this: to walk away is not to abandon love, but to honor it at a higher level. For true love cannot flourish in the absence of self-respect, nor can it grow where the soul is silenced. Thus, let your leaving be not a retreat, but a return to authenticity, to the voice within, to the eternal truth that your worth has never been diminished by who stayed or who left. And as Jung reminds us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. So step forward, not in despair, but with reverence for the path that heartbreak has revealed. For it is through this breaking that the self calls you into wholeness. When a woman walks away from a relationship, the world often misunderstands her. Some call her cold, some say she gave up too soon, others whisper that she will regret it. But I tell you this: she does not walk away because she is weak. She walks away because the soul refuses to remain where it cannot grow. The psyche does not lie. When love turns into self-betrayal, the unconscious begins to protest. It speaks in dreams filled with unease, in the heaviness pressing against the chest, in the restless nights where the heart will not settle. What the world calls heartbreak, I call the awakening of the self. For too long, women have been conditioned to give away their essence, to mold themselves into what is expected, to silence their truth so that love may survive. But when the tension between who you are and who you pretend to be becomes unbearable, the mask crumbles. The inner self demands freedom, and leaving becomes not an act of abandonment, but of profound healing. Do not mistake this pain for punishment. Carl Jung reminds us that pain is a messenger, an initiation into transformation. The heart aches because the old image of love is dying, and in its place, a new consciousness struggles to be born. Just as the caterpillar must surrender to dissolution within the cocoon, so too must you pass through this breaking in order to emerge renewed. The question is not, why was I not enough? The deeper question is, what part of myself have I been called to reclaim? For within the shadows of grief lies the seed of individuation, the sacred journey back to the wholeness that was always yours. Individuation, Jung tells us, is not comfort. It is not the easy road. It is the calling to become who you truly are. And often, it is heartbreak that first sets this path before you. For it is in the shattering of illusions that the self is revealed. When a woman walks away, she is not merely rejecting another. She is rejecting every false narrative that demanded she be smaller, quieter, less herself. She is saying no to the roles that suffocated her spirit, and yes to the unknown path of authenticity. This is why the leaving hurts, but it also heals. Jung asserts that the unconscious will never allow us to remain in denial forever. If we betray our true nature, the psyche will rebel. It will rise up in dreams, in anxiety, in heartbreak, until we can no longer ignore it. What feels like devastation is, in truth, a summons, the self calling you to come home. To grieve deeply, to feel the full weight of your loss, is not weakness. It is courage. For every tear that falls is not only sorrow, it is cleansing, it is release, it is the alchemy of the soul. Grief strips away illusions and lays bare the essential truth that your worth has never been tied to who stayed or who left. So walk forward, not with bitterness, but with reverence. The end of this relationship is not the end of your story. It is a passage, a threshold, a sacred doorway through which you must pass to meet yourself more fully. Carl Jung tells us that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And so, this heartbreak, as painful as it feels, is part of that privilege. It is the soul's insistence that you shed what no longer serves you, so that you may step into the life that does. You have not been abandoned. You have been summoned into your own depths, summoned into your own strength, summoned into the truth of your own becoming. And when you honor that truth, when you choose to belong first to yourself, love will find you again. But this time, it will not be dependency. It will not be fear of loss. It will not be the desperate attempt to complete yourself through another. No, it will be the meeting of two whole beings who have both answered the call of their own souls. That is love in its highest form. That is the love worth waiting for. So if you are walking away, walk not as one defeated, but as one reborn. The breaking of your heart is not your ending. It is the self rising. Imagine her in the quiet hours of the night, where the world has gone still but her mind will not rest. She lies awake, staring into the darkness, and every memory flickers across her thoughts like old film. Moments once sweet now turned sharp with absence. She feels a hollowness in her chest, as though part of her has been carved away, leaving a wound that no hand can touch. Her pain is not only the loss of him, but the loss of the version of herself she became in order to be loved. She grieves not just the relationship, but the compromises, the silences, the parts of her that she buried so he might stay. Now, in the quiet, she wonders, who am I, if not what I gave away? There is fear here, a deep, primal fear of being alone, of never being chosen again, of walking a long road without a companion. She feels the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her shoulders, the question of whether love will ever return or whether she has forfeited her chance. And yet, beneath the sorrow, another feeling stirs, a fragile hope. It whispers faintly, like the first light before dawn. It tells her that maybe, just maybe, this breaking is not the end, but the beginning of something more true. She senses that within the ashes of what has fallen apart, there lies the seed of her becoming. She fears the nights, but she also feels moments of strange clarity. She notices the freedom in her own breath, the space around her where compromise once suffocated. She begins to imagine herself differently, not as someone waiting to be loved, but as someone learning to love herself. This is the paradox of her journey. She is both broken and awakening. She is both grieving and becoming. Her tears are not only of despair, but of release, each one carrying away a weight she no longer needs to hold. Carl Jung tells us that the psyche suffers greatly when we resist its call. And so, though she feels abandoned, she is in truth being summoned into wholeness, into authenticity, into the deep knowing that her worth was never dependent on another's recognition. Her pain is real, her fear is heavy, but so too is her hope. And it is this hope, however faint, that carries her forward, that allows her to walk away not as one defeated, but as one becoming. At first, the days blur together. She moves through them in fragments, half alive, half lost in memory. The weight in her chest feels immovable, as though grief itself has taken residence in her body. Yet quietly, almost imperceptibly, change begins. She notices it one morning when she wakes, and the first thought in her mind is not of him. It surprises her, this small gap where pain once lived. She does not celebrate it yet, but she feels it. A flicker of space, a breath that is her own. Healing does not arrive all at once. It comes in whispers. In the moment she takes a walk alone and feels the sun on her skin, not as reminder of what she has lost, but as nourishment in itself. In the evening she lights a candle, not to grieve, but to honor herself. These are quiet rituals of reclamation, the psyche slowly stitching itself back together. Carl Jung tells us that the soul carries within it a natural drive toward wholeness. And so, despite her sorrow, an inner wisdom guides her forward. She begins to write, to dream, to imagine life beyond the shadows. The unconscious, once heavy with protest, now begins to offer visions of possibility. She discovers that her strength does not roar. It grows silently, like roots beneath the soil. Day by day, she learns to trust herself again. She listens to her body, the way her chest expands when she tells the truth, the way her spirit softens when she chooses peace. Her fears still visit her, the fear of being unloved, the fear of walking alone. But she meets them differently now. Instead of shrinking, she observes. Instead of surrendering, she breathes. Fear no longer rules her, it becomes her teacher. And hope, once a faint whisper, grows stronger. She sees that her solitude is not emptiness, but spaciousness, a place to plant new seeds, a place where her authentic self can rise, unburdened by compromise. This is how she emerges, not in sudden triumph, but in gentle persistence. Through tears that cleanse, through silence that reveals, through choices that honor her soul. And as Jung reminds us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. She is beginning to understand. This heartbreak was never her ending. It was the threshold of her awakening. Her healing begins quietly, but now it gathers momentum. What once felt like mere survival slowly transforms into conscious living. She is no longer only escaping her pain. She is creating her life. At first, her steps are cautious. She sets small boundaries, ones she once would have ignored for the sake of harmony. She says no where she used to say yes. She notices that each refusal is not rejection, but protection, an act of loyalty to herself. She starts to explore forgotten passions. A book left unread, a hobby abandoned, a dream shelved in the name of love. She picks them up again, tentatively at first, then with growing excitement. Each rediscovery feels like finding a piece of herself she thought was lost. Her emotions shift in waves. Some days, grief still comes like a storm, but she no longer fears the rain. She lets it wash through her, knowing it will pass. Other days, laughter catches her by surprise. It feels different now, more genuine, more rooted in her own joy rather than borrowed from someone else. Carl Jung asserts that the soul longs for individuation, the integration of what has been lost or hidden. And this is what she feels, a gradual reuniting with herself. Where once there was only longing for another, now there is presence within her own being. She begins to move with confidence, not because she no longer hurts, but because she has learned that hurt does not diminish her worth. The fear of being alone softens into acceptance, and acceptance blossoms into freedom. And in this freedom, she discovers something unexpected: gratitude. Not for the pain itself, but for what it revealed. For how it stripped away illusions. For how it demanded she return to her center. For how it taught her to love herself as deeply as she once longed to be loved. Her forward movement is not a sprint, but a rhythm, a dance between sorrow and renewal, between endings and beginnings, between the woman she once was and the woman she is becoming. And as she walks onward, she feels lighter, not because the past has disappeared, but because she carries it differently now. Not as chains, but as wisdom. She knows that love will return one day, but she no longer waits for it desperately. She is too busy becoming. She feels different now, not entirely healed, but not broken either. There is a quiet strength in her chest where once there was only emptiness. The ache hasn't vanished, but it has softened into something she can carry without collapsing beneath it. She feels her breath more fully, deeper, steadier, as though each inhale reminds her that she belongs to herself first. When she looks in the mirror, she sees not a woman abandoned, but a woman becoming. Her reflection no longer asks, "Am I enough?" Instead, it says, "I am here. I am whole. I am mine." There is still vulnerability within her, but it no longer frightens her. Instead, it feels alive, real, human. She allows herself to feel sadness without shame, joy without restraint, solitude without fear. Carl Jung tells us that the self reveals itself in symbols, in dreams, in the movements of the heart. And she feels this unfolding within her. The world looks different, not because it has changed, but because she has. The same streets she once walked in sorrow now carry a sense of possibility. The silence of her home no longer echoes as loneliness, but as space, room for her voice, her dreams, her essence to expand. She feels grateful in a way she never expected. Grateful for her courage to walk away. Grateful for the tears that carved out space for something new. Grateful, even, for the heartbreak that shattered her illusions and returned her to herself. And most of all, she feels free. Not free of memory, not free of desire, but free of the need to lose herself in order to be loved. This freedom is both tender and powerful, fragile and unshakable. She feels like a woman who has passed through fire, not untouched, but transformed. Her scars are not signs of weakness, but symbols of her resilience. And in this new state, she carries both peace and anticipation. Peace, because she has found herself. Anticipation, because she knows, deep in her bones, that love, when it comes again, will meet her in her wholeness, not her wounds. If these words resonate with you, if you feel a reflection of your own journey within them, then I invite you to join us. Become part of this community, a place that is safe, peaceful, and understanding. Here, you don't have to carry your healing alone. Subscribe, and together we will walk this path day by day, supporting one another, remembering that every step forward is a step toward wholeness. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Share where you are on your journey right now, what you're feeling, what you're moving through. Because your voice may remind someone else that they are not alone, that we are all connected in this healing. So stay with us, heal with us, and let us grow together